demonstrating to this committee how you have acted in accordance with the Nolan Principles or relevant codes. Now, the first such example occurred on the 11th of December, only 4 days ago. You posted on your personal X social media account, and I quote, "Catching the bus shouldn't cost the earth. That's why we are capping bus fares at £3 and investing in new buses and stops." Your words, is that correct, Prime Minister? But X-readers added context to clarify your comment. They said, important reminder, that a £2 cap was introduced by the Tories in 2023. Labour have since risen this by 50%. Prime Minister, which of the Nolan Principles do you consider to have followed in publishing your X post?
Well, let me just deal with the substance of that, if I may, because the £2 cap was put in place and it came to an end in December 24 with no funding for it to continue. And therefore, that was the end of that scheme. What we then put in place was a new scheme for a £3 cap on bus fares, which I'm really pleased that we've been able to do, and that's what I was drawing attention to, not only in the post that went up on X, but also in the visit that I took part in last week. But the scheme that was introduced by the last government, I acknowledge that, came to an end, so that was the end of that capping scheme. What we then put in place was a further capping scheme.
Mr Costa.
Thank you. Can I turn to ministerial statements to the House and standards expected? Under the Ministerial Code at 1.6 brackets B, it states ministers have a duty to Parliament to account and be held to account for the policies, decisions and actions of their departments and agencies. At para 9.1, it states when Parliament is in session, the most important announcements of government policy should be made in the first instance to Parliament. And at para 9.3 it states every effort should be made to avoid leaving significant announcements to the last day before a recess. Prime Minister, are you familiar with these three extracts from your own ministerial code?
Yes.
Thank you. Only a few days ago, on Wednesday the 10th of December, on a point of order, the Honourable Member for Harrow East, in respect of the police settlement or the local government settlement, said, and I quote, "Normally there is a debate held about both of these matters, or at least a statement given on the floor of the House, so that members are able to ask questions on the settlements. I understand it seems to be that the government's intention to put out a written ministerial statement on the last day of Parliament and not give us, that is MPs across the House, an opportunity to challenge. Mr Speaker responded, and I quote, "I do take this matter seriously and the House should hear that. A written ministerial statement is not the answer on matters so serious, and those in the Treasury bench should have heard that point. We should not shy away from this House. In fact, we should always come to the House first. I cannot say it more than I do, and this is the salient point. Once again, I suggest that at some point the ministerial code needs to be changed if people are not going to take it seriously, people being your ministers. Given Mr Speaker's response to that point of order, can you tell this committee why your ministers are failing to follow the Nolan Principle of accountability, which requires that they submit themselves to scrutiny for their public decisions?
Well, I do take this seriously and regularly discuss it with the Speaker, and he raises his concerns with me, and we usually try to address the concerns that he's flagged with us. And I'm always happy to do so. That's an ongoing discussion so that there is the scrutiny that is needed of the statements that have to be made.
When ministers fail to update the House and answer questions from MPs, which part of the ministerial code is being upheld?
Well, it's not just the ministerial code, it's the role of Parliament, which almost sits above the ministerial code. Mr Speaker feels this very strongly, that we are accountable to Parliament.
Do you feel this very strongly?
Yes, I do, and that's why I regularly discuss it with the Speaker and look at... He will usually flag with me where he's got concerns, as I would expect him to, and then we go through those and try to make sure they're not...
Were you aware of this point of order raised last week?
I was, yes.
Thank you. I will now refer to a further contemporary example. I understand that this coming Thursday, the last day before the forthcoming parliamentary recess, your government, Prime Minister, intends to publish a progress report on the Grenfell inquiry by way of a written ministerial statement. Given Mr Speaker's comments and your confirmation that you're aware of that point of order, as head of government, why are you permitting this lack of upholding standards, given the important progress report in the Grenfell inquiry and other statements that I understand will be made on Thursday? What are you going to do about that?
Well, I'll happily have a look at the proposed written ministerial statement on Thursday and discuss it with the Speaker.
Thank you. Now, paragraph 1.6 bracket C of the Ministerial Code quotes, "It is of paramount importance that ministers give accurate and truthful information to Parliament, correcting any inadvertent error at the earliest opportunity." Prime Minister, you are of course familiar with that paragraph of your Ministerial Code, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Again, by reference to a recent example and to assist you in showing how you comply with the extract from the Ministerial Code, I would like to turn to last week's Prime Minister's questions, when the Leader of the Opposition asked you, how many extra teachers are there since your government took office? Now, fullfact.org, a neutral website, only a few days ago published that the PM, and I quote, claimed that the number of teachers in England is more than when the Conservatives left office. Fullfact.org added, and I quote, "This is not supported by the latest school workforce census figures, which show a fall, not a rise." Can you tell this committee which Nolan principle underpinned your answer?
Well, what I was putting before the House is the fact that we are committed to recruiting an additional 6,500 new teachers, and we've got record numbers of trainees coming into the system, and therefore that number is going up. The role, if you look at secondary schools, further education colleges, the number of teachers has gone up. That's absolutely clear. That's what our commitment was. In relation to primary schools, the number of pupils has gone down pretty dramatically in terms of the birth rate, and therefore the sheer number of teachers at primary level has gone down because less teachers are needed because the birth rate has gone down. But the focus, just for completeness, in our plan for change and in a manifesto was on 6,500 new teachers for secondary schools, specialist schools and colleges, and that's the number I was referring to.
Thank you very much. Can I now turn to the issue of written parliamentary questions and standards? Now, I know my colleague, the Honourable Member for Lancaster and Wyre, as Chair of the Procedure Committee, has issued calls for evidence in her committee's new inquiry. Now, paragraph 9.8 of your Ministerial Code states, and I quote, "Ministers should, where possible, provide full and timely responses to written parliamentary questions, ministerial correspondence and select committee reports." Once again, can I ask you to confirm to this committee that you're familiar with that paragraph of the Ministerial Code?
Yes.
Thank you. Can you explain why your government is failing to provide timely responses to WBQs as obligated under the standards outlined by your own Ministerial Code?
Well, we do our level best to comply, of course, and I think the Procedure Committee is looking into this, which we welcome, and we'll study carefully the findings and any recommendations that are made.
Thank you. Paragraph 1.6d of the Ministerial Code states, "Ministers," and I quote, "should be as open as possible with Parliament and the public, refusing to provide information only when disclosure would not be in the public interest." Are you satisfied that this is in compliance with the high standards you've set your government, the responses that are currently being made?
Yes, but obviously if the Procedure Committee in due course sets out its findings and any recommendations, I'd want to study them to see whether we can improve in any way.
Smith, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Prime Minister, it's an indisputable fact that political staff in Number 10 have been briefing against serving Cabinet ministers, and you and I both sat on opposition benches whilst we had to watch the painful spectacle of political advisers briefing under Johnson and a litany of Tory Prime Ministers. Given that your record when it comes to ministers shows that you've acted very decisively and without favour in terms of applying the ministerial code, I wondered if you could say, given your responsibility for setting and upholding standards across government. If you could explain what steps you've taken to establish the facts and how you're going to ensure that number 10 political staff act in accordance with the Ministerial Code, the Special Advisors Code and the Nolan Principles.
Yeah, I mean, let me say to start with that briefing against Cabinet Ministers is completely unacceptable, whether that's from number 10 or anywhere else. And I've made that repeatedly clear to my staff, to the Cabinet, and put in place a number of procedures where there have been such allegations to give me a level of assurance that it has not happened in relation to direct briefings against ministers and members of the Cabinet. But I've been really clear and consistent on this with my staff, with my team, with the Cabinet, and put in place procedures when there are allegations to assure myself what the situation is.
Well, and on the subject of leaks, Prime Minister, last week the Treasury Select Committee had the Chancellor in front of us, and she was very cross about the information that was in the 13th of November Financial Times article by George Parker, a renowned political journalist, and she was clear that that was a leak, and she said, and I'm absolutely categorical, and I'm quoting her here, that this was not an authorised briefing. It was incredibly damaging and frustrating. That is why we have a leak inquiry. It was not briefing that was signed off by me or any of my ministers or officials. It was unacceptable. So that does, if it's not the ministers and other officials in the Treasury, there is a danger that it could have been a leak from number 10. Do you think there was a leak from number 10 Downing Street about the budget?
In relation to that incident, there's a leak inquiry going on, as I think
we know, yes, absolutely, yes, yeah. The Chancellor's announced.
So that will go wherever the evidence takes it.
So if there was a leak from number, do you think there was a leak from number 10?
I've no reason to think there was a leak from number 10.
So, but if there were a leak from number 10, what would you do about? What would you do if there was someone was found?
I'd take action. I mean, and I have taken action. It's very difficult with leaks to get to the source of the information.
You would take action?
Where that has happened in the past, I have taken action, which has led to the removal of individuals.
Okay, so you would go as far as removing an individual if they were found to leak the budget?
Obviously I'll wait for the inquiry, but I mean, the inquiry will go wherever the evidence takes it. There's nothing to inhibit where they will go, and I'll take appropriate action if there's a finding
because the report in the FT was very clear. It talked about an official source, and Mr Parker is a journalist who would have sourced that story. So
I'll get to the bottom of these leaks. They are in any organisation, they're intolerable. I took the same action when I was head of the Crown Prosecution Service. There is a leak inquiry. It can go wherever the evidence will take it. And if it comes to a conclusion, I'll act on it.
Okay, so you're going to be ruthless with whoever's done this if they're
Well, I want to stop these leaks.
Thank you very much. Mr Alberto.
Thank you, Chair. There is a separate code of conduct, of course, governing standards for special advisors. It's called the Code of Conduct for Special Advisors. You are, of course, familiar with this document, aren't you? Thank you. Paragraph 13 of the Code of Conduct for Special Advisors states, and I quote, "Briefing on purely party political matters must be handled by the party machine. For the purposes of this code, can you confirm that Labour Party leadership speculation is a purely party political matter?"
No, I'm not sure I can. It seems to be pretty right. I mean, in terms of the code, I know exactly where it should be dealt with, but I can say, hand on heart, that none of it is comes from me or is encouraged by me.
Well, we'll come. But I just wanted to confirm that it's a purely party political matter in accordance with the code. Labour Party.
Well, I mean, I think the code is dealing with political briefings of a political nature, which have to come through the party, obviously, and can't come through the civil service. I think wider speculation is not necessarily a code issue.
Thank you. Well, paragraph 15 of the code, just to help you, Prime Minister, goes further. Special advisors must not take public part in political controversy. They must observe discretion and express comment with moderation, avoiding personal attacks. So you're very familiar with the code. I would like to refer to an interview that you gave to Sky News last month. On that interview, for the purposes of assisting you, Prime Minister, I'll just recap that interview. You were asked, you say that was unauthorised, referring to alleged leaks about Wes Streeting. You said that was unauthorised. That makes it sound you've lost complete control of your Downing Street operation. Why didn't you sack the person who was responsible for attacking one of your colleagues? You responded, "First, Let me be absolutely clear that any briefing against ministers is completely unacceptable. That is not a new position for me. It's a position I've adopted ever since I became Prime Minister. I've been talking to my team today and been assured that no briefing against ministers was done by number 10. You're saying it didn't come from Downing Street. And you responded, I've been assured, second time, it didn't come from Downing Street. Who gave you that assurance?
Well, I had assurance from within Downing Street on
Who gave you that
a
assurance?
number of different levels, different people in my team.
Who gave you that assurance?
Different levels in my team. I'm not
Can
going
you
to...
please tell us who gave you that assurance?
Were they officials or for special advisors that were giving you assurance? Just give us a
special advisors.
Thank you.
I'm not going to name members of staff,
No.
but I will add this. I didn't just take everything at face value. I looked at other bits of evidence to assure myself about what I was then saying publicly to the media.
Thank you. That interview ended as follows. If it didn't come from Downing Street, where did it come from and will you sack the person responsible? You responded, well, I will absolutely deal with anybody responsible for briefing against ministers. And this is the salient point. I've always said that's the standard I expect and that's the standard I will enforce. Although you just answered a moment ago to the chair that you have taken action and you've removed individuals, can you just confirm for this committee that in the example that I've cited, when you said that you would enforce a standard, what standard did you enforce in respect of this example?
Well, I can only take action where I've got a clear finding that somebody has breached a relevant duty or standard. When I have had that, I've acted accordingly. And that's not something new to me as Prime Minister. It's what I did as Leader of the Opposition. It's what I did as the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Thank you. My final questions, Chair. Can I turn to another issue that you rightly regularly raised when you were Leader of the Opposition, namely your frequent criticism of previous administrations' alleged cronyism and the way in which public appointments were undertaken? Now, only last month, Prime Minister, you profoundly regretted your own involvement in the appointment process for the chair of the Independent Football Regulator. In your own letter to your independent ministerial advisor, you said, and I quote, in retrospect, it would have been better if I had not been given the note or confirmed that I was content with the appointment. This was an unfortunate error for which I express my sincere regret. Sir Laurie, in his response, stated, it is regrettable, as you say in your letter, that despite the recusal we agreed in autumn 2024 concerning the Football Governance Bill, you were asked to confirm that you were content with the proposed appointment. Can you give this committee an update on progress of your internal review that you said to Sir Laurie would take place to ensure this breach in standards does not happen again?
Well, firstly, can I say, in relation to David Coburn, that he was first approached by the previous government for this role. And therefore, I reject the cronyism allegation, which I don't think should rightly be put in his case. He was then endorsed by the cross-party committee. So he was headhunted by the previous government because of his suitability for the role, appointed by this government and endorsed by the cross-party committee. I had recused myself in relation to the bill. The decision to appoint was for DCMS minister. That's set out in the legislation, in the statute. So I knew full well it wasn't my decision. As it happens, a note was put before me to say that's what was going to happen, and was I content? And the independent advisor took the view, which I agree with, that it would have been better if that note had never been put before me. In other words, that the recusal had meant I didn't even get the note before me. But when I said I was content, I was well aware I wasn't the decision maker, because I knew that the legislation set out who the decision maker was, and it was the minister in the relevant department by law, and therefore it couldn't be me in any event. I had actually been talking to the independent advisor about it throughout, as he makes clear in his letter. So this was I always take his advice, even if I don't think there's anything wrong, just so that I've got. But just you asked me when you asked me, I've now asked him to look again at when someone says they're recusing themselves. What are then the processes that need to be put in the office to make sure that even a decision which isn't for the recused person is coming by way of note, in effect, isn't put before them, and that's what I, just to make sure that we're not in that position again. But I was well aware that I was not the decision maker because I knew by law it was the Minister.
Thank you. Thanks, Prime Minister. Finally, on other public appointments, can I refer you to your recent